In this episode of Rewind and Renerd, we discover that Frakes has both a degree in anthropology and Butterfingers. Daniel doesn't like his mac and cheese tasting like chicken. Carter hates the ambiguous nature of the locker room's gender as much as she hates those sandy planets. Pelops gives 100 blissful days to everyone. O'Neill spent them sleeping with a 31-day-old and gets hung over. And Teal'c decides that he needs to open carry a staff weapon while traveling on Earth after watching TV. This and more on Rewind and Renerd. Episode number 5, the first one that we come across tonight, is the First Commandment. In this episode, one Captain Hansen makes a primitive village, a primitive group of people kind of think that, he's their god. Ooh, apparently we're matchmaking.
Avengers, with your help, we've managed to zero in on a major AIM research
Didn't mean to. Oh, sorry.
Take it out. You carpet bomb the area.
Didn't mean to matchmake there. My apologies.
Do as much damage as we can.
Don't want to hold up anybody's gaming experience while doing the podcast. But
yes.
First Commandment, Captain Hansen makes a primitive village believe that he is their god and begins to rule over them as such. What's more is that he even begins to believe it. Two of his team, Connor and Frakes, try to warn the SGC, but are unable to. Franks is killed in the attempt. SG-1 is sent to investigate, where they find Connor, and when they find out what's going on, they decide to bring Hansen in for a court-martial, one way or another. There are complications, but SG-1 does succeed in foiling Hansen's plot, and the God's followers, little g, decide to throw him to his death into the gateway to the netherworld, which is the Stargate.
For the moment, Commander, though
in this episode, we see how being an advanced civilization and being a primitive civilization, one has the ability to kind of levy that sort of ignorance of a newer civilization and wow them into believing things because of advanced technology. Captain Hansen's entire plan revolved around a device that the Goa'uld, who had transported these people there to have them as slaves, had used to protect from the harmful radiation of the sun in the system. It creates basically a dome between two energy points, and the dome protects from the UV radiation and it turns the sky orange at the same time. Polar While they're there, Samantha Carter, who we learned was previously romantically involved with Captain Hansen, thinks that she might be able to kind of turn him back to the good side, that she can kind of talk him out of his egotistical nature, which, of course, we see does not happen. Frakes kind of exhibits this sort of attitude in this, I don't know, Carter calls it the insanity fringe. But he has his own member, a member of his own team, Frakes, tied up and left out in the sun, which is a death sentence. And you can kind of see where he was going insane, even believing that he was a god, because, well, he was basically trying to have people crucified and executed because they defied him, because they did not believe he was in fact their god. We learn in the episode that Hansen was looking for God due to some bad stuff that had been going on in his life, the failed marriage or almost marriage rather, to Samantha Carter, our lovely brainiac of the SG-1 team. I think the exact quote he has was that I was looking for God, and here I am. Sort of basically saying that he discovers that he is God, and he uses a lot of stuff out of the Christian Bible as sort of a reference point to the way he talks, what he says and the kind of acts that he sets up, sort of selfless acts of benevolence to win over the tribes people of the primitive village of the primitive planet. And, you know, if you're really a good guy, you're not gonna, even if you think you're gonna be helping out a civilization by ruling over them, you're really not. And you're just kind of giving into your own corruption, your own sense of superiority. We see this in other sci-fi type shows as well. Of course, it comes from different perspective. Something I really like about the perspective of SG-1 throughout the show is that, you know, Earth, humanity, the Teal'c, we're the underdogs. We're not a highly advanced, you know, galactic spanning civilization like the Asgard, or say that kind of look into Star Trek a little bit. You know, we're not Starfleet. The SGC is not Starfleet. We're just normal people, normal humans, trying to figure everything out in a league that we are way outmatched. It creates a lot of good humorous elements throughout the show, but it also shows that in an instance like this, even though we are not highly advanced, just because we are more advanced than another civilization, we can fall prey to the same entrapments, the same sort of vanity, if you will, that leads us to believe that just because we are superior, we can do something to make the lives of these people better. Sort of where Star Trek gets its prime directive from, right? Well, of course, Hansen's not going to go along with it. He's not going to go back to the court martial. He's God. And O'Neill does try to prepare SG-1 for the fact that they will, in some degree, probably have to take Hansen out, kill him, take him down, and bring him back dead for his court martial if he resists. Tries to enlist the tribes people to go on the offensive against SG-1, which of course he does. SG-1 being the good guys, of course they're not going to slaughter a bunch of innocent tribes people, so they try to use the stealthy way. Try to get Connor out, try to escape, try to see if they can't resolve the issue without bloodshed, but in the end, God's followers take care of that. Now, one of the townspeople, Jamala, he thinks Teal'c has a career in art from his drawing of the valley and how the machine would work that has the two different receivers that move the energy to create the shield. Hey, he's on range to. Yep, there we go. Let's just go ahead and deal with the Dreadbot first. We also learned from this episode that Carter likes ornithology, because she does remark at one point that there are no bird signs. You know, I'd have to say, if you're the only one listening for if there's birds or not, you gotta like ornithology. Not a whole lot to this episode, just a good telling of the old, you know, those that are advanced must be careful when encountering primitive civilizations. A good sort of refresher of the prime directive on the SG-1 style instead of Star Trek.
Aim and trap is down.
Connor is saved. Frakes doesn't make it, and the other member of Captain Hansen's team, I think that is Sergeant Baker. I think he is brought back for court martial, so all does work out in the end. And of course, the false god is taken out. Big theme that we're going to be seeing throughout the first few seasons are false gods while they're fighting and taking on the world. Of course, corruption from within. Next up on the roster tonight was Cold Lazarus. Now this, as I said earlier when we were starting the stream, this is one of my least favorite episodes of the entire show. But just because it's one of my least favorite doesn't mean it's not good. So for Cold Lazarus, we have Daniel likes to stroke the big crystal. Carter hates the ambiguous nature of the locker room's gender as much as those sandy planets. Jack needs to find Charlie. Teal'c learns the importance of verifying permission to fire a staff weapon in the gate room. And real O'Neill is mad that everyone left him on the planet.
Watch your backs out there. Ain't stepping up.
This episode, and I don't think they actually said the planet designation in this episode, but they come across a very yellow, sandy planet, and they come across a sort of crystal-based life form it takes the form of crystals. It says that it's energy, that it is unity, that scientists like Carter would describe it as such. It's a polymorph by nature because they are able to take on the form of SG-1, replicate their faces in crystals to basically be able to communicate with them. But you see a massive crowd of busted up crystals at the very beginning. Later on, we find this to be a mass grave. Goa'uld had come to this planet, and when Goa'uld had tried to interact with people of the world, trying to, I guess, people of the world trying to greet them, the Goa'uld trying to let them know that they have new gods and new rulers. But one of the Jaffa of the Goa'uld was killed. So the Goa'uld ordered all the crystals to be rounded up into one spot, blasted. SG-1, while they're scouting through this mass grave, O'Neill comes up against one of the denizens of the planet who has not been killed. Their crystal is still fully intact. And when O'Neill goes to touch the crystal, he is blasted back by a large energy pulse and knocked unconscious. This is the same thing that happened to the Jaffa of the Goa'uld when the people of the Unity tried to greet the Goa'uld.
Our enemies are close.
At this point, though, the people of the Unity are... Are you serious right now? The people of the Unity are afraid. They are afraid that SG-1 might be the same as the Goa'uld and have come to kill them. So when O'Neill is knocked unconscious by the one member of the Unity, that member of the Unity takes on O'Neill's form. So that way he can look into his mind and basically do what SG-1 does and perform recon. Well, when this member of the Unity looks into O'Neill's mind, O'Neill being a colonel, a formal special forces officer back during, the Cold War, he sees the mind of a warrior and becomes even more afraid, which is why he decides to do recon, posing as O'Neill, to see what the intentions of the SGC and its people are. While looking into O'Neill's mind, the member of the Unity finds out about Charlie, and when going to investigate, discovers that it's a source of great pain and loss for O'Neill, because Charlie, O'Neill's son, accidentally killed himself by shooting himself with O'Neill's gun, his personal firearm at home. This, of course, led to issues in the marriage with O'Neill's wife. They became separated. And the member of the Unity discovers all of this by going and talking with O'Neill's ex-wife, Sarah, visiting Charlie's room, touching Charlie's things, which helped to, in whatever way, clue the member of the Unity into O'Neill's thoughts and memories.
Be careful. They're well equipped.
And this helped the member of the Unity to see that Earth and the SGC and SG-1 were in fact warriors, but not to be feared like the Goa'uld. They were not conquerors, they were not destroyers. They were explorers and protectors. Well, while communicating with a different member of the Unity, Daniel and Carter learn from this member that you need to return us to the planet because our energy will become unstable, and when it does, boom, bad things will happen. It's about this time, while fake O'Neill, the member of the Unity, is out having ice cream with Sarah, that his energy matrix starts to become unstable. And and you see this flash of like electricity across Fake O'Neill's body, and weird sounds. We'll come to find out from Carter, being a scientist, she discovers that whenever this happens, a massive burst of radiation is released. Anyone that's exposed to it long term can begin to suffer radiation poisoning and mal effects. So of course now we're worried about Sarah, O'Neill's wife.
Out for new tricks.
Now she's being endangered by this member of the Unity, and this member of the Unity is not even wanting to. Just wanting to do some recon. Scout was afraid of what maybe SG-1 and the SGC were going to do with them and his people. Well, it's at this point the real O'Neill comes back through the gate. He's mad that everybody left him on the planet. Comes busting out the gate, looking at everybody. Of course, the SGC thinks he's an imposter, so they have all the airmen, guns leveled, ready to take him down if he's in fact a Goa'uld or some kind of enemy. And he just plops out the gate. Hey, what are you guys doing leaving without me? Hey, what's with all the ordnance here? And of course, shortly after putting him in a holding cell, Hammond and the rest of SG-1 realize that yes, this is the real Jack O'Neill. We're not being deceived here, and they immediately begin looking for the imposter. Well, Carter and Jackson inform O'Neill that, hey, we got a member of the alien race here. He's kind of scouting out. That they were afraid of us. They're not a threat. We just need to find him and get him back to the planet. Well, at this point, the Unity O'Neill has been admitted to a hospital, and his energy matrix is becoming so unstable. He's starting to emit these like little electrical bolts. All sorts of electrical equipment in the hospital starting to malfunction. Real O'Neill comes in with the Air Force, evacuates the hospital, and has a good heart-to-heart with Unity O'Neill, who at this point talks to O'Neill about Charlie and the pain of his loss, and even takes on the form of Charlie. This kind of helps give O'Neill some closure to everything that's happened, because let's face it, no matter how much time has passed, the loss of a child is the loss of a child. That's a haunting experience, especially how it happened for O'Neill. In another episode, talking to Jackson,
Monica's plan B. We need to take
it might have been this episode. It all kind of runs together when you're rewatching the show for the umpteenth time. But in an episode that we have seen up to this point, O'Neill is talking to Jackson about it. And he tells Jackson that, my wife was able to forgive me, but I don't think she can forgive. I'm the opposite, though. I can never forgive myself. Sometimes I can't. And that really shows just how haunting the loss of Charlie was to O'Neill. We got to see a little bit of that in the Stargate movie, but it was kind of glossed over a little bit for the purposes of getting things moving forward.
The vents on its feet are overheating.
Plus, it was a movie. You don't have as much time to expand on a plot point like that in a movie as you do a TV show. But with Unity O'Neill taking the form, and I'm not even paying attention here. With Unity O'Neill taking the form of Charlie, real O'Neill does get some closure. And I even think, to a small extent, he is finally able to forgive himself some.
Target the eye while it's repairing.
Sarah, though, something I'm kind of disappointed in is that we never actually see any kind of development between O'Neill and Sarah after this. It's almost as if, this happens, it's done, it's over, it's no more, and that's the end. Kind of a plot point that I don't think is ever fully resolved, really. But nonetheless, it is a very good episode. It's very slow to me, and one of the main reasons I'm not a huge fan of the episode is because of how Unity O'Neill is acting. I find it very hard to believe that no one in the SGC, with things that have happened up to that point, you know, Kowalski getting infected by a Gould and getting taken over, and them having to deal with that whole debacle. You know, the fact that they were captured by Apophis, and Teal'c had to help them escape from Teal'c. I don't see someone like O'Neill acting that oddly, and no one taking notice of it. No one really thinking anything of it. It just, I don't know. It just doesn't sit well with me, especially with how security gets amped up over the years. It was kind of a big downer for me. I'm sitting here screaming at the TV the whole episode. You know, how do you not know that's not O'Neill? Like, he's acting completely strangely. He's talking to you about a family that you never knew he had. He's pulling stuff out of his locker that you didn't know existed. You know, you're having to find out from Daniel that he never talks about something yet. He just kind of casually disgusted with you in the locker room here recently, Carter. That didn't raise any alarms. Of course, I know you don't know Colonel O'Neill that well. You guys haven't been working together for that long, but I don't know, for the kind of shenanigans and stuff that they get into, it seems like that's kind of something that would, you know, trip a red flag, you know, somewhere, somehow. It seems like might raise an eyebrow, you know. Maybe not quite as high as the Rock's eyebrow would raise, but, you know, it's still going to be a raised eyebrow. You know, you're still going to get a good, you know, Teal'c raised eyebrow out of it, right? I don't know. Maybe I'm looking too much into things there. Again, it is a great episode. It's just one of my least favorite, personally. Start to jump out of there. But that then brings us to the next episode, The Nox. The Nox is one of my more favorite episodes. We get to see a great cast of guest stars in here as well. We get to see Frida Petrani as Laia, the female Nox of the episode. We get to see Armin Shimmerman play Antaeus, sort of the dad but not the granddad in the episode. And I forgot to write down the little boy's name, but the little boy and the other gentleman that played Ofer and Freyu, I didn't see anything that they had appeared in that I recognized off the top of my head on IMDb. That may be why I don't exactly have their names written down. But the premise of this episode is that SG-1 is being pressured to bring back advanced technologies that Earth can use to defend itself against a Gould attack. And I'm going to get hit by this one. They are pressured by the Secretary of Defense to bring something tangible back. So Teal'c asks, what technologies do you seek? And they're of course like, well, you know, you're the advanced alien, you tell us. So he spoke of a technology not even the Goa'uld had been able to come to possess just yet. The ability to completely camouflage oneself into their environment. And this, of course, we learn later on is a power of the Nox and not of the creature they came hunting to catch to study. Before they encounter the Nox, though, SG-1 finds that Apophis and 3 of his Jaffa guard are on the planet as well hunting the creature. So, Daniel, one of the smart ones of the team, gets the bright idea that, hey, we're gonna capture Apophis. Even though we mostly just have like trank darts, we can still knock him out, capture him, bring him back to base, force him to tell us all about Goa'uld technology, force him to tell us where Sharae is, force him to tell us where Skara is, and everybody can go home happy.
That felt good.
In the attempt, every single member of SG-1 but Teal'c is killed. But before Apophis can deliver the final blow to the Jaffa Shova, everybody disappears from around him. Even his own wounded new First Prime Shackle, Teal'c's former protege.
Nothing like carpet bombing
SG-1
aims,
awakes
smashing up their
in a
stuff
hut.
to help a person feel like they've had a productive day.
When they
You
come
said
to
it,
and begin to
Commander.
get up and move around,
Thanks again, everyone.
they are met
The
by
more we hammer
Laya and
Ames'
Ofer.
research, the weaker they'll get.
Or Oper.
Works for
sorry.
me.
Now the Nox first appear as a fragile creature. They appear to be thin, frail. They have very defined features, very sort of a elvish type of bone structure. They're a very sylvan race. Their hair appears to be grass, and they have this sort of like wreath of twigs and flowers and stuff that's kind of mounted around the hair. I'm not sure if that is part of their natural biology, or if that's just, you know, like a headdressing they like to wear. But it lends into the very sylvan, the very sort of fairy-like nature of the race. Plus, the entire planet is a forest planet. further leaning into that. One of the reasons the Nox are one of my more favorite races is because they are a race that commands a sort of respect, an almost obedience of sorts. Later on in the Triad, the episode Triad, where we are seeing we're seeing Skara basically on the planet of Tolan, and he's in a court trial to determine who has
We heard
right
you
to
managed to
his
locate
body,
one of Ames'
him
main
or
research
the gold that's taken.
We have, Captain Rogers.
And
Really appreciate
the
it if
gold
Avengers could
that
help us
represents
take it down.
the gold
With
inside of
pleasure, Doctor.
Skara is
Jarvis,
Brash,
were you able to do
Consult
the thing I asked?
SG-1,
If by thing you mean
who is there to
something
defend
block all
Skara's
local
right
network
to the
activity
body.
to
Laya,
ensure any project
Nox,
data
is there
destroyed
as an
on
impartial
site is
party.
deleted permanently,
objective,
then
outside opinion.
yes.
Hill here. In
Now,
addition,
again,
we'll
the
carpet
gold
bomb
Zapata
the area before you
In
arrive.
this later
It probably
episode,
won't damage the structures much, but it should help
he'll insult
soften any
SG-1, he'll
security
talk
response.
over, and he'll interrupt
Fiery
him.
proclamation from
Very
the sky.
discourteous.
I like your style.
SG-1 does the same thing to Zapata, but none of them, not even the Tolan educator,
Security will be tight.
forget what her
They might
specific
even have
role
elite
is called in the
assassination
Triad,
teams on
but
site.
the judge, the
I've sent
Tolan
my best
judge,
people to back you up, but be
none
ready
of them
for anything.
ever speak over or interrupt Laya and Nox. They have this commanding presence about them, that even though they look frail, looking,
Best way into the facilities.
everything's kind of nonchalant,
I've got a squad in the area to
as
lend
if
a
they're
hand.
not afraid of
Let's
anything.
kick down the front
I guess
door. Stand firm.
comes from wisdom and some of their
On their way.
abilities. One of these abilities is that they are able to heal wounds and even bring people back from the dead. They do this for SG-1, and they also do this for Shackle, because they don't believe in violence. They don't believe in wars and whatnot, like humanity and the old are getting involved. Also, with how powerful and ancient they are as a race, they really kind of don't have to worry about it either. Unbeknownst to SG-1 at this time, while they're in the village, they are completely cloaked and camouflaged and hidden. Finally. Once Shackle comes to, he makes sure to ruin this, and kills Laya so that way he can escape, he believes, and make off to Apophis to let him know about what he's found. SG-1 believes that they need to make weapons, and even though the Nox won't give them back their guns and whatnot, they begin to make arrows and bows, weapons out of the forest, weapons out of wood. As Carter says, that's that special forces training. Never give up. Of course, the Nox support this, and when SG-1 faces down with Apophis again, almost got hit there. When SG-1 faces down Apophis again, the Nox prevent them from knocking out Apophis. SG-1's plan was to use an arrow with the trank dart that Apophis had, but the Nox had missed immediately. He was going to use it to capture Apophis. well, the Nox still trying to get SG-1 to see that there's a different way, a better way than their way, a better way than the war and fighting. And that's when we get to hear one of the most impactful lines, one of the most impactful quotes SG-1 gets to hear early. And Teal'c says to O'Neill, "The very young do not always do as they do." Powerful. Now this is a specific reference because Freyu at this point has run off to check out the pool himself. He's curious. He's very young. And Teal'c is kind of upset with O'Neill. And all of this is because, hey, you know, you were teaching him your ways, you were showing him your ways, you were showing him making weapons and whatnot. Shortly after this scene is when the SG-1 faces down against Apophis, and of course, Nox prevent Apophis' capture. At the end of the episode, and Teal'c reveals a massive floating city in the sky that had been completely hidden the entire time, and it was in full view of the Stargate when you came out the Stargate. And just very plainly he says, "One day, O'Neill, you will learn that your way is not the only way." And the last thing O'Neill says before he goes through the gate is, "The very young do not always do as they're told." And Nox told them that. So we do see that SG-1 is learning. We do see that they are not completely inconsiderate of the ramifications of their actions, if not a little short-sighted when it comes to Apophis. This episode, while again, not a whole lot's gone on and not a whole lot goes on in these 4 episodes, but this episode is a very good learning lesson for SG-1. Now, it does take them a little bit of time to actually absorb and practice the lesson that they learned, but they do take it to heart very quickly, that the very young do not always do as they're told. And they even use this later on when they meet one of my other favorite races, the Teal'c, to be a little bit rebellious, and they make Laya smile. Well, I don't think I've ever seen a Nox laugh, so I guess a big smile is about as close to laughing as, you know, the Nox get. Now, Laya is one of my personal favorite characters because she demonstrates that sort of quiet, reserved power that the Nox have. Demonstrates that power that isn't brute strength. Now, the Asgard, a race we'll meet later on, you kind of see them exhibit their, you know, their sort of advances their power through kind of a sort of brute force of intellect. But the Nox are, I don't know, you gotta watch out for them. You know, they're real sly, real wise folks. I'm kind of sad that things ended the way that they did at the end of the episode. I would have loved for there to have been a short couple of lines between Teal'c and O'Neill where Teal'c kind of, you know, sort of invite him back to learn, you know, to be able to grow wiser and help to mature as a race some. But the Nox being very reserved and I would even say to a small extent xenophobic in nature. No, they're just like, you know, no, we're just going to bury our Stargate. You know, we're just going to kind of cut ourselves off from people like you and the Gould. Can't blame them, but I don't know. I would have loved to have seen a development of the friendship between the Teal'c and the Nox. Now, this does bring us on to our next episode, which is a brief candle. Oh crap. Not paying attention. I'm about to have a brief candle. Go big. Go big. Pull the parachute, ripcord. again, we barely avoided that. Let's go ahead and make sure the team's good.
Fire now. Locking on. Take their flanks now.
You know, you didn't lock anything onto me there, Mr. Talkative Exo guy. Unless you were shooting some hammer tech at me, you know, maybe then you did lock on. Shit, guys. There we go, we'll use Hulk. Hulk can absorb the bullets. He doesn't get hurt. Alright, now that we've recovered from that almost very bad thing happening, that brings us on to our next episode and final episode of the night, Brief Candle. Now, Teal'c gifts everybody with 100 blissful days. O'Neill spends his sleeping with a 31-day-old and getting hungover. Teal'c deciphers an ancient Goa'uld text. Daniel delivers a baby and studies Mycenaean culture. And Fraser and Carter figure out how to manipulate Goa'uld nanites. When SG-1 first comes out the gate in A Brief Candle, they come across a somewhat Greek-looking culture, which, through a short comedy exchange, we learn that the Mycenaeans are, in fact, Greek. But they come out in a temple where two of the local denizens had been praying to Teal'c, had been praying that their child would come out healthy and would be strong. Well, when SG-1 comes through, it kind of startles the poor lady into labor. She begins to have the baby right then and there. Carter gets elected to be the one to, you know, deliver the baby because, you know, she's a girl. And of course, Carter, being the scientist that she is like, what are you guys talking about? I don't know how to deliver a baby. Fortunately, Daniel, on a previous dig, had learned from a midwife how to deliver a baby and delivers the second ever baby, which is named Baby Daniel, after Daniel, because he delivered. Now it's at this point that SG-1 is taken to meet the rest of the people, the rest of the chosen Teal'c. And it's sort of a kind of a party going on. And that's when they learn from the gentleman that they'd already met in the temple that Teal'c gives 100 blissful days that they are to spend in joy, party, merriness, and all sorts of other, you know, sort of more adult type of extracurricular activities. Now it's at this point that SG-1 is welcomed with open arms, greeted with food and drink.
Got one.
And a young, special little lady named Cynthia decides that she's going to make a special dessert that is only for O'Neill, she says. It's only for him. Now, shortly after beginning to eat this little dessert, which O'Neill finds to be absolutely delicious, he notices that he's feeling, he's feeling pretty good. He's feeling, he's feeling kind of loose, kind of hip, kind of high, kind of happy. Getting in the mood, And that's when some rather energetic drum music begins. And Cynthia comes out in a special little outfit, doing a special kind of dance for O'Neill, and takes him back into her hut. Well, the rest of SG-1 is prevented from interfering, kind of being assured that, oh no, this is a perfectly natural thing. It just happens all the time with the festival, right? Happens all the time with the festival. Well, we flash forward an unspecified period of time, and we see O'Neill is, he's a bit, he's exercised a bit, and, Cynthia was, a sort of exercise partner, if you will, and, well, she's passed out. The sun is going down outside, and everybody else from the village kind of comes into the huts and all lay down and all pass out at the same time. This, of course, alarms SG-1. They're like, well, you know, we gotta figure out what's going on here. This is completely weird and nuts. And it's right about that moment that O'Neill kind of begins to feel a bit fatigued, more so than he previously was. And he kind of collapses on the floor, you know, slowly, and passes out himself. Well, SG-1 begins to look around and investigate, but can't really figure out what's going on. Of course, they alert the SGC, and they get the blood samples of O'Neill, and they go back to see if they can't work with Frazier to figure out what's going on. Well, O'Neill begins to age rather rapidly at this point, quickly turning into an old man that looks to be 80, even though he's only 40. We see this happen across a few scenes. He kind of ages what we see to be about...
Yep, I still got it.
I'm going to guess about 10 years per scene, because it's about 4 scenes later when he's got real long gray hair, he's kind of getting a bit thin on top, you know, looking real kind of wrinkly and scraggly, and he himself says he looks 80 and is 40. So it's about 4-ish scenes, 5-ish scenes, so about 10 years per
Stay
per
alert,
lead.
Avengers. AIM still has a lot of security.
Now, Frazier and Carter figure out that it's sort of a virus that was put in the chosen people of Teal'c by the Gould Teal'cs that have brought him there. And after doing some deep analyzation and research, they discover that it's more of a nanite, more of a specialized kind of nanite developed by the Gould. Daniel and Teal'c at this point have discovered a sort of data pad, a keeping of records by Teal'c
Never
on the
underestimate
experiment.
the power of a big paycheck, Doctor.
They learned that Teal'c brought the Mycenian culture, you know, the people there, to experiment on them, to accelerate the natural evolution of humans. He accelerated their lifespans so that they would only live 100 days.
Watch
and
out
would
for
be
new tricks.
an old person that died of old age at 100 days. He needed to know what the human body was going to evolve into. He needed to kind of see how good of a host the human's body was going to continue to be, you know, the further time went on. This is something that we see other Gould experiment with. We see Near-T experimenting with this. We see Anubis experimenting with this. I think Ball even does a little bit of experimentation. That's where his clones come from. But we do see a lot of experimentation with this. Gould are very interested in having as perfect of a host body as they can.
Yes, the flesh wolf.
I don't know why they do that so in an episode coming up, I think in the next episode of Rewind and Renerd, we are going to be covering Thor's hammer, where we get an introduction to a Viking culture, basically the people of Thor, people of the Midgard. And we learn that the first race that the Gould used as host was a race known as the Mutants, who would become a bigger and bigger part of SG-1. Well, more of a side part, a bigger side part of SG-1 later on. We get a good couple side stories involved with this. But yes, Gould are very interested in having as perfect of a host body as they can, because of course that's just going to make them more powerful. Well, the reason O'Neill is aging so rapidly is because the Gould nanites are having to work overtime because he's an already grown and developed human. He's not, you know, born with them in him and then artificially aged from birth. So they had to pull some overtime.
Nice work, Avengers. The exit
to
is
be able to
below your
age him.
current position.
Now, of course, Frazier, along with Carter, do end up developing a fix for the nanites, and they are able to save O'Neill by the end of the episode. But something else that has happened by the end of the episode is that O'Neill is getting the chosen of Pelops to kind of forsake him. He's been able to show them that, you know, he was a ghoul. He was able to convince them that they were brought there for experimentation. He convinces the people to topple over the statue of Pelops, which is where O'Neill finds a device that is basically the pivotal clue that allowed Daniel and Teal'c to have a frame of reference for translating the Gould text, allowed Fraser and Carter to kind of have an idea, a plan of attack for how they were going to solve the problem with this sort of Gould nanite.
Thank you, Commander.
You're welcome. And likewise, Doctor.
Also, in getting them to forsake their former god Pelops, he gets Cynthia to wander beyond the borders of where Pelops commanded that they never wander from. And this was because the device that they found controlled the nanites in all of them. And when you wandered beyond this particular distance, this particular range, the device could no longer control the nanites. So when sundown came, he didn't go lay down with everybody else all at once and in one big, massive, group cuddle, all fall asleep.
Jarvis made sure of that. The data was transmitted to a local server that came online once we
now this
reactor.
is just another instance, kind of like in the a couple episodes ago when we were going over the First Commandment of getting people to forsake false gods. Again, it's going to be a big theme we're going to see throughout all of these episodes. Well, at least for the first few seasons. Until we start to get into things beyond the Gould arc. You're not going to let me jump up there, are you? No, you're not.
Here we go.
Now that does cover the synopsis of the 4 episodes that we went over. Chat, you've been quiet. What did you guys think of the episodes that we watched? Did you guys have a particular favorite? Did you have a favorite sort of joke, a favorite little trope that we encountered? Have you ever watched the show before? What's your favorite race overall? What's your favorite episode coming up? What's your favorite arc? Your favorite season? Who's your favorite bad guy? Come on, get in here with me. Chit chat. Let's talk about this. This is something that I want to do, and I want it to be basically a big sort of interactive podcast where we talk about, shows that we like, episodes that we like. And of course, as we get more and more interaction, we will expand these to other shows. Same thing for The Expanse. I know SG-1 is an older show, but it doesn't mean we can't get down and have some fun with it. We're going to be moving into the after discussion now. This is not going to be really included in the cutout of the video, and I'm probably going to go down here while I'm getting my timestamp. Now, because not a whole lot went on in these 4 episodes, they were kind of quicker episodes. Of course, there wasn't a whole lot to discuss. There wasn't a whole lot to really go over. Now, something I would be interested in is I would be hearing your guys' thoughts on what we saw in the First Commandment. Just because you are an advanced civilization, does that give you the right to rule over another civilization? Not necessarily as their gods, but like the Goa'uld or Captain Hansma, maybe even as their sort of superiors, because you are more advanced. Does that say give you any kind of right, any kind of sort of justification for ruling over a less developed race? I mean, that's something that can be translated to countries on our planet currently. Does this more powerful nation really have the right to rule over a sort of smaller nation, a sort of not as militaristically powerful nation? Is there any basis there, or is that just kind of, it's just a fantasy. It's just something that'll never come up. Personally, I think it is a good illustration of, even if you're not posing as a god, not posing as, something like that exerting one's force unjustifiably because you believe that you are doing what is right, that by you deciding someone else's destiny, that you in fact have the right because you're more powerful and more advanced. I mean, I think that's something that we need to take to heart here with stuff that's been going on in our own world lately. Now that is a bit more of a charged topic, I guess. They do have a couple of large topics, a couple of big swingers in the first season, but they are pretty self-contained, which is kind of why after Children of the Gods that took up most of our discussion for last week's episode. But yeah, that's why in these kind of shorter, more contained episodes, there's not necessarily a whole lot to go beyond. They do a good job of containing the episodes and the stories and sort of moral point that they wanted to convey. They didn't really drag it out. They didn't get too preachy, but they definitely drive home the point in these episodes. And at the same time, this is not exactly a topic that they rehash a whole lot. SG-1 is there are a few tropes that they rehash on a bit of a regular basis, but most oftentimes once they've got the trope over, they've got the trope over, or if they've had an episode like this, or last week we went over the episode with the people of the steppe, Shabadai, and Carter, of course, was a woman on a male planet where women were second-class citizens. Yeah, that was a bit of a charged episode too, with a bit of a charged topic. But like I said, they knock a few of those out real quick early in SG-1. That. Now, of course, with these earlier episodes, we also are establishing all of our personal character background. We get a lot of backstory called Lazarus on Colonel O'Neill. So they can be slower, shorter. Wow. Go me! Not paying attention. Getting nailed in the face by things. But, not here for the game. We are here for the podcast. There are a couple of episodes coming up where we're going to start to get a bit more backstory on Daniel Jackson. Of course, we've had from the movie and from Children of the Gods Part 1, all of his backstory is kind of established there, but we do get to see some glimpses of other things coming up. We also get to see Catherine Langford come into the show coming up on the next episode. Rewind Renerd, I do believe, if I was looking at the episode titles.
The data was transmitted to a local server that came online once we attacked the arc reactor. It appears to be a weaponized...
And Catherine Langford is one of the characters that I really love that comes back from... Whoa, oh, no, wait on the link. There we go. Oh, and of course I have to jump off. Like a smart person. She is one of my, she is a character I do like to see come back from the movie initially. And the lady that they have playing Catherine, I think, does an absolutely wonderful job. And we even get to see somebody that plays a part in another Stargate TV show. We get to see him play one of the characters in these episodes. Now, even though we don't have a lot to discuss, that doesn't mean we still can't have fun with SG-1. These next few episodes coming up, I think we are going to have a bit more discussion coming up. We are going to get to see a few things sort of begin to creep into the Stargate universe that we've seen hints of, but we're going to get to see an expansion of it. Let's go and take these things out. And we're going to get to start getting involved in the larger goings-on of everything in the universe.
Thanks, pal.
Going to get to meet the Asgard. We're going to get to learn some things about being captured, what it means to be taken over by a ghoul. A lot of cool and fun stuff. Now, probably my favorite little scene from the whole night, or from the whole episode, was in the episode, I do believe it was called Lazarus. Teal'c watches TV and he sees the news. And he becomes genuinely afraid of Earth because on the news he sees riot, he sees a lot of angry people, and Teal'c also discovers that heavy metal music hurts his ears. He remarks to Daniel Jackson, "Yours is a strange world." Jackson, real smart alecky, just kind of quips back, "So is yours." I don't know, Teal'c getting to learn kind of the sort of Data learning to become human, trope. I love all the sort of stuff that he gets into. I especially love when they introduce him to movies. Teal'c gets really into movies. One of Teal'c's favorite movies that he sees is Star Wars. Which, if any of you guys are wondering, because this is a podcast that focuses on pre-turn-of-the-century sci-fi, nerddom, and fantasy type stuff, yes, we will be taking a break at some point for a week or two of SG-1 to cover the original Star Wars trilogy. That's right, episodes 4, 5, and 6. And we will also cover episode 1, because those are all of the good Star Wars movies, and all of them came out in the year 2000. All of the good, none of the bad. It's almost like I planned it, right? Okay, so I did plan. Don't act. I don't like the Star Wars. I don't like it one bit. Here, this third one. Here. Just lay into it. But that is gonna just about do it for this episode of Rewind and Renerd, guys. It's been fun having you out. I do want to say thank you for coming and watching, and we will catch you next time. We go back in time once again to check out the next 4 episodes of Stargate SG-1.